Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the Best You podcast. This podcast exists to help you be a more competent, higher character person so that you can live a life of more meaning and impact. Today's topic is going to be all about protein, why the current recommendation is wrong, how much you should eat and why, the science behind why protein is really the most critical macronutrient when it comes to longevity, why and how protein matters even more when you age, and then so much more. I'm going to be breaking down 6 different ideas that you guys need to know when it comes to protein. All right, you guys, today's topic is going to be all about protein. Now, I hope you're listening. I hope you're interested because this is a topic that gets discussed about a lot, protein, when it comes to the workout community. And I think oftentimes people just think about it in terms of muscle building and in terms of aesthetics, the way that you look. But protein is super, super, super important when it comes to longevity. In an effort to continue to learn, I'm always watching videos, listening to podcasts and stuff like that. And I recently listened to a long episode with Dr. Attia and Dr. Rhonda Patrick. These two are two of the most well-respected scientists and doctors in the field of longevity. And they had a really long conversation about protein and the importance of it and when it comes to longevity and performance and stuff like that. And most of today's topics is going to be breaking down some of the things that they discuss. We'll make sure that video is linked up in the show notes. So if you want to see the extended version of their conversation, then you can check it out. But I'm really excited to get into kind of 6 different points today. Again, and I hope it will allow you to leave today's episode being convicted that protein is super important, giving you the specific, practical, actionable walk away number with how much you should be eating on a daily basis. And then I hope it gives you the why behind, okay, I'm really motivated to do this because I know how important it is. And so I hope you kind of walk away with that information from today's episode. But before we dive into the idea number 1, I want to encourage you. We're going to be opening up a gym in 2026. We're not exactly sure where or when yet, but we feel like it's going to be hopefully happening sooner rather than later. And we want you to get the first behind the scenes information about where it's going to be, when it's going to be. I want you to be able to become a founding member at Best You HQ. And if you want to get that behind the scenes information about when we're looking, where we're looking, founding membership pricing, class options and stuff like that, then you can go to nickcarrier.com/bestyouhqnews. Again, nickcarrier.com/bestyouhqnews. If you put yourself on that wait list, then you're going to be getting information sent to you about founding membership options, about where we're looking to open, when we're looking to open. You're going to even have a say into what equipment we're going to have, what class times we're going to have, what types of classes that we're going to have, and everything like that. So make sure you sign up for that waitlist for free by going to nickcarrier.com/bestyouhqnews to join a waitlist of people to get the behind the scenes information and get first access to limited time founding membership pricing. nickcarrier.com/bestyouhqnews. I'm so pumped to open this gym, and I want you to walk in with me on day 1. Okay, let's dive into tip number 1 when it comes to protein for longevity. And these will kind of build off of each other, and so it's really important to make sure you hit all of these. So number 1 thing that I want to talk about is that the current RDA, the current recommended daily allowance of protein, is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. Now, I want to make sure that I'm not talking too much about math because it's hard to follow if you're just listening or just watching, but 1 kilogram is around 2.2 pounds. And so in our American system, you would divide 0.8 grams by 2.2, and that would give you the current recommendation is about 0.36 grams per pound of body weight. So a 200-pound person would only be recommended to consume about 72 grams of protein on a daily basis. And that is a terrible recommendation. And that's exactly what Dr. Attia and Dr. Rhonda Patrick say as well. And they said that this number was derived based off of how much nitrogen was excreted in urine after metabolizing protein. But that was a flawed way to look at it. So they say the recommendation that's been holding steady for years and years and years is simply based off of this one way that they went about it. And it hasn't been updated since. And so we need a much better update on the recommendations for protein. The second point that I want to get into that I think is really important for all of us to understand is that when it comes to the 3 macronutrients, there's carbs, there's fats, there's proteins. Fat can very easily be stored in big quantities. Carbs can be stored in pretty big quantities as well, but then when they're stored in excess, then they're going to be turned into fat. Protein is something that can't really be stored in abundance. And the only place that we can store it is in skeletal muscle. So we can easily store fat in abundance. We can store carbs in pretty good abundance too, but we can't really store protein. And the only place that we can store protein or amino acids is going to be in your skeletal muscle. And the one thing that we have to remember is that everything in the body actually requires protein. It requires amino acids to function. There's so many different processes that require amino acids. I even just did a simple Google search just to give you some of all of the different things that protein is required for. It builds proteins, it repairs tissues, it produces enzymes and hormones. It also is important for neurotransmitter production. It's important for your immune system support. It's important for metabolic pathways. It's important for hormone production, for all these different things. And so I think oftentimes, if you haven't really learned that much about protein, you just equate protein with muscle, and you just equate protein with looking a particular way and trying to get jacked. But it's like, no. Protein is super important for your hair, your nails, your skin, your hormones, your metabolism, your brain. It's like we need protein. And so let's think about it this way. Okay, if we need protein for all these different things, there's all throughout the day, amino acids are being used for all of these different processes. But we can only store so much of it. And the only place that we can store it is in our muscles. And so if we are deficient in protein, then we're going to be pulling amino acids out of the skeletal muscle to do all of the other things that amino acids need to do in the body, like tissue repair, like hormone production, like enzyme production. And so we're literally going to be catabolizing or breaking down our muscles because we don't have enough amino acids. And so it's going to be pulling from our muscles to be using it for these other things. And we don't want to be breaking down our muscles. And so we are going to be breaking down our muscles or catabolizing our muscles if we are in amino acid deficiency, because we need so many amino acids for so many different things throughout our day. So that is super important to understand, that protein is not just muscle and aesthetics. Protein is vastly important for so many different processes that go down inside of our body. So that's the second point I wanted to make. The third point I wanted to make is that Dr. Peter Attia and Dr. Rhonda Patrick have really gotten to the point that the bare minimum amount of protein that somebody should be consuming, kind of based off of this idea that we need to make sure that we're not in amino acid deficiency. That's kind of, actually, as I'm kind of recording this and thinking about this, that was their frame of reference in terms of how much protein should be recommended, instead of what they did years and years ago in terms of basing a protein recommendation off of how much nitrogen was excreted in urine after metabolizing protein. It should be recommended more so based off of how much amino acids are required for different processes inside the body, and then therefore how much amino acid and protein are required to make sure muscle is not broken down and we're not having to pull amino acids from the muscle to be used elsewhere. And their recommendation for bare minimum on a daily basis is 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, or 0.55 grams per pound of body weight. That is the bare minimum amount that would probably, for most people, begin eliminating age-related muscle loss. They said it's shown to decrease frailty in women of old age. And so bare minimum, 0.55 grams per pound of your body weight. Now, one of the things that they did say is that, this is my fourth point, you get a huge benefit, a huge uptick, a huge benefit going from 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram, or 0.55 grams per pound to 0.72 grams per pound. I'm going to try to use both of those numbers to be kind of like discussing it in the way that scientists usually describe it, because they usually discuss it in terms of kilograms, not pounds. But I also want to make sure that I know I don't use kilograms very often, and most of you guys aren't going to want to do the math, so I'll use grams per pound as well. And so the reason why this increase from 1.2 to 1.6 or 0.55 to 0.72 is really big is because it's a huge uptick in muscle protein synthesis. So muscle protein synthesis is a really important concept to understand. That is where your body is able to synthesize or create new muscle. Now, I'm going to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper in a second. But before I do, this 1.2 to 1.6 increase allows muscle protein synthesis to really increase dramatically. And when I say muscle protein synthesis, it's the creation and building of new muscle. And so that 1.2 to 1.6 increase, or 0.55 to 0.72 increase, really allows muscle protein synthesis to that curve to increase. Now, once you get up to 1.6 or that 0.72, if you continue to consume more protein, muscle protein synthesis continues to go up, but the curve flattens out. So if you're watching on YouTube, then you can see visually how my hand is going to draw this. But let's say you're 1.2 and muscle protein synthesis is here. As you go up to 1.6, it really dramatically increases. And then once you get to 1.6 and you go above that, it's still increasing, but at a lesser degree. And so the analogy that they use is like, let's say you get a towel that is just drenched in water, and then you start to wring that towel out. Right when you start to wring it out, like that thing is dripping water. It is like flooding the floor. There's so much water coming out. Once you do that for a little bit, though, you have to continue to wring it and kind of wring it harder. And water comes out, but not quite as much water comes out. And you can wring it harder, and then there will be more water that comes out, but not quite as much water as before. And so it's like when you increase protein above 1.6 or above 0.72, you're still going to get some bang for your buck, but not as much bang for your buck as when you went from 1.2 to 1.6 or from 0.55 to 0.72. And the thing that Dr. Peter Attia says in this video is, show me the science that shows that above 1.6 or even above 2.0 is harmful. He's like, I haven't found any evidence or any science or any really reliable study that much protein is in any way harmful. And so let's again use this spectrum, 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. And then from 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram is like, I'm still going to get more muscle protein synthesis, but not as much bang for your buck. But that's when we're just talking about protein in terms of consuming it for the benefit of muscle protein synthesis. One of the other things that's great about protein is it's very filling. It's the satiety benefits, meaning that protein is going to be more filling than carbs and fats. And so if you have a goal of, let's say, fat loss, or you just have a goal of like not trying to always be starving, then protein is a good tool that you can leverage in order to curb your hunger levels. And so if you go from 1.6 to 2, maybe you're not going to get as much muscle protein synthesis bang for your buck, but it could prevent you from overeating in other ways. And so there still is good benefit from satiety benefits and helping you achieve a caloric deficit, if you will. Okay, that was a lot. I hope you're still tracking. We're going into point number 5, anabolic resistance. So I talked about how when we're in amino acid deficiency, that can catabolize our muscles. Catabolize is a term that essentially means breaking down. Anabolic is a term that essentially means growth, or more specifically, like the definition of anabolism is the synthesis of complex molecules in living organisms from simpler ones together with the storage of energy, or constructive metabolism. So to be in a state of anabolism or to be anabolic means that you are growing, means that you are building muscle. Now, when we age, there's something that's called anabolic resistance that we experience. So think about this. As we get older, we experience anabolic resistance, meaning our muscles are resisting growth. As we get older, our muscles resist growth. Now, what's actually happening here is like the muscle tissue. This is where we go back to muscle protein synthesis that I was talking about earlier. Muscle protein synthesis is the creation of new protein in the muscle, or hypertrophy, to get bigger, the muscle getting bigger. In order for that to occur, the muscle tissue has to receive a signal, has to receive a noise that's like telling the muscle tissue that, hey, you need to grow, you need to get bigger. And there are two signals that trigger muscle protein synthesis, and that's protein intake and resistance training. So the two main things, because carbs can help a little bit, but the two main things that are going to provide the signal to the muscle that says get bigger, that says we need to undergo muscle protein synthesis, is enough protein intake and resistance training. So as we get older, our muscle tissue becomes less sensitive to these two stimuli, meaning the same amount of protein in a younger adult will have 2 times as much protein synthesis than that of an older adult. So if you have, this is what they said, I don't exactly know how you would say the ages, so don't fact check me on the exact ages that I'm about to throw out. But let's say the younger adult is 35, the older adult is 55. Again, I don't know exactly these two ages, but the 35-year-old, and they're both about the same body size, let's say they're 200 pounds. The 35-year-old consumes 150 grams of protein. The 55-year-old also consumes 155 grams of protein. The 35-year-old will have 2 times as much muscle protein synthesis than the 55-year-old with the same amount of protein. Now, that is not factoring in resistance training. One of the exciting things that they said is that if both of those people are resistance training, then they have very much more similar levels of muscle protein synthesis. So while protein and resistance training help induce or trigger, I should say, muscle protein synthesis, resistance training can really, really, really help. And so kind of the takeaway is that as we get older, in order to fight anabolic resistance, we need to, of course, resistance train, and then we also need to take in more protein. I actually took a nutrition course about 1.5 years ago, and I learned that their recommendation is that you should aim to increase protein by 1% for every 1 year over 40 years old that you are. So let me say that again. Increase protein by 1% for every 1 year over 40 years old that you are. And so how does this play out numerically? Let's say you're 50 years old and you weigh 200 pounds. The recommendation might be 200 times 0.7 grams per pound of body weight, and that's 140 grams of protein. So you want to increase that by 10%, which would mean 154 grams of protein would be your recommendation. So if you're 50 years old, you're 10 years older than that 40 mark, so you would increase by 10% based off of the current recommendation of 0.7 grams per pound of ideal body weight. I hope that you tracked that. Let me break that down one more time. The traditional the recommendation that I usually give my clients and that Dr. Peter Attia and Dr. Rhonda Patrick really recommend is 0.7 grams to 1 gram per pound of your ideal body weight. Let's really make that clear. Ideal body weight. So if you're 200 pounds and your ideal body weight is more like 175, then you would base this math off of 175 pounds. Okay, so the recommendation is 0.7 grams to 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So if you're trying to do the math, take your ideal body weight, multiply by 0.7 and multiply by 1. That's your range. If you're over 40 years old, then you would increase that intake by 1% for every year. So if you're 54, you would increase the recommendation number by 14%. And so you would take your recommendation number and multiply it by 1.14. And that would be the recommendation that you should take because of anabolic resistance, because it is more difficult for your body to build new muscle tissue as you get older. That is why this episode is called Protein for Longevity, or why this episode topic is protein for longevity. It's not just about muscle. It's not just about looking good. It's about being able to maintain your muscle mass. And the reason why that is so important to maintain your muscle mass is because it's super important for your metabolic health. Your muscle is your metabolic currency, is what Dr. Gabrielle Lyon calls it. Your metabolic currency, because when you consume food, your muscle is the thing where that food can be shuttled to be broken down. And so all of your metabolic markers and your blood work and everything like that is going to be so much better if you have healthy muscle tissue. So muscle is your metabolic currency. That's just metabolic health. We haven't even really talked too much today about just functionality of staying strong and having muscle as you get older, being able to stay independent. And that's a whole separate topic that we could get to, but obviously that's a critical topic when it comes to protein intake for longevity. Now, the last point that I want to make, before I dive into the last point, remember, we're going to be opening up a gym in 2026, and I'm going to make it my mission to be the most desired, sought-after, respected, badass gym in Nashville. I cannot wait to have my own space, for us to have our own space, to have our own roof, our own walls, our own equipment. Like, this is going to be not just a gym, but a home, a place where people can go throughout the day to just see friendly faces and have fun and bust their butt together. And so if you want to become a founding member, if you want to get behind the scenes information about when we're opening, where we're opening, get founding membership pricing, then you need to go to nickcarrier.com/bestyouhqnews. nickcarrier.com/bestyouhqnews so that you can walk in with us day one. Okay, the last point is that Dr. Peter Attia is like the recommendation that I give, talking in terms of him. He says that he recommends people shoot for 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, or 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight, right at about that. It might be a little bit less if you actually do the math. But he was like, if you shoot for a high goal and you miss it, then you still are at about, you're still in the range where you're not an amino acid deficiency. If you just shoot for maybe that 1.6 number and then you don't hit it, then you might be an amino acid deficiency and therefore catabolizing your muscle. And he really believes that like every day that you miss this, you're going to be taking a slight step back. And he says that like if you take a slight step back one day, the next day if you overconsume, you're not going to be making up for that. He's like, that's not exactly how it works. And so he was like, protein intake is super important on a daily basis to make sure you're not breaking down muscle. You don't want to break down muscle because it's super hard to put on as you get older, but you fight anabolic resistance by increasing your protein intake by 1% for every year over 40 that you are. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I know we kind of went a lot of different ways, but I hope more than anything, you start to take protein more seriously. Like I am somebody who's been taking protein seriously for years and years and years. But after hearing this episode, I'm like, wow, I'm even more convicted now to really take this number more seriously and be sure to really try not to miss it on any day. Try not to miss it on any day. And if I miss it on one day, make sure that I don't miss it on the next day. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope today's episode helps you to live a longer, healthier life. And I hope it allows you to take protein more seriously and everything like that. Remember, become a founding member at Best You HQ. You will not regret it. I won't let you regret it. I'm going to make this gym so fun, so welcoming, and also results oriented. Like I don't want you just to come to class or come to work out just to do it. Like I want you to get out of it what you put into it. I think so many people have gym memberships to the YMCA or a random group class place, and they never show up. They go weeks and months and sometimes years without ever even going, and they're just literally lighting money on fire. Like I don't want that for Best You HQ. I want this to be a place that you have a membership and you attend and you love it and you get your bang for your buck, and you even get more bang for your buck than you're even spending. So go to nickcarrier.com/bestyouhqnews to make sure you get the first behind-the-scenes info about the new gym in 2026. All right, you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope today helps you get closer to your health and fitness goals. And ultimately, I hope today helps you get closer and closer to your best you.